Are you getting told to keep it down but don't want to wear a bulky headset when playing your PS5? Well, channel sponsor SteelSeries have released their first ever set of earbuds specifically designed for both gaming and everyday use. Their Arctis GameBuds support 2.4 GHz wireless via USB-C dongle, meaning that they work on a PS5, but they also support Bluetooth, have active noise cancelling, and up to 40 hours of use before having to plug them in. I've been using them since they were released and they're fantastic, and you can get a 12% discount on them when you use offer code SKILLUP at checkout. Stick around to the end of the video to learn more. In 2020, I basically awarded Ghost of Tsushima my personal game of the year, and I say basically because the game sat a little awkwardly at the top of my list. What I said back then was that when it comes to a game of the year list, I put a big premium on innovation, and Ghost of Tsushima wasn't really innovative per se. Instead, it was an incredibly refined version of the open world formula that we've been playing throughout most of the 2010s, and so it felt more iterative than breakthrough. That didn't stop it from being a phenomenal game, mind you. In fact, it was so good that one of the other things I said in that Game of the Year video is that I think this particular spin on the open world formula, this map marker driven, AAA, Ubisoft inspired cinematic open world action game, Ghost of Tsushima essentially perfected that formula to the point where there was nowhere else for it to go. On that basis, I was really hopeful that developers would begin to reimagine the foundations of this genre so they could push new frontiers and deliver us something we hadn't experienced before, rather than another version of a game we've played dozens of times now. Ghost of Yotei is exactly what I had pleaded for Suckerpunch to not make. It's Ghost of Tsushima again, but with better visuals and a way worse story. We'll do the full review, don't worry, but that really is the strapline. If you've played Ghost of Tsushima, you have already played this. With how central storytelling is in these sorts of open world games, I came away from Yotei feeling not a lot of love for it, despite it being a pretty phenomenal game in terms of its visuals, technical polish, and combat. If that sounds like a pretty searing indictment of the game, I don't really mean it to be. I'm not here all indignant being like, this is outrageous. It's more just like, I don't really feel anything towards this. All of its breathtaking beauty and remarkable technical polish and its brilliant combat is overshadowed by how familiar all of this feels and how thoroughly disappointing its story is. You might be like, dude, what the hell? You love Ghost of Tsushima. If this is so similar, why are you dunking on it so hard? Well, I guess it's two things. Number one, people change and their tastes change and evolve, especially when there's so many of these sorts of games and they all feel so familiar. You do get tired of them. But also, you know, I made this specific point 5 years ago. I said it was time for this formula to evolve, but it hasn't evolved one iota here in Yotei. But more than that, I really cannot overstate just how important writing is for me at this point. If you want me to saddle up for a familiar gameplay experience, then I'll do it, but the story better be really good. I look at the recent Silent Hill F, which had fairly basic visuals and some janky puzzles, and its combat was not good. But man, what an experience. The way its story and its characters immediately seared themselves into my memory. My first playthrough of Silent Hill F was 9 hours long, and I had thoughts and feelings and emotions throughout nearly every minute of it. I played Yotei for 40 hours, and I definitely never had to think at any point. We'll talk more about the quote-unquote puzzles later on. And in terms of feeling, the most pervasive one was boredom, and that's the truth. The point I made 5 years ago about the need for new frontiers, I made that point because if you enjoy these sorts of open world games, then Ghost of Tsushima didn't have any flaws that needed to be fixed in a sequel. The only place Suckerpunch could go was innovation, and there's just none of it here. And imagine where Suckerpunch could have taken Yotei. What if it had adopted the curiosity-driven approach of something like Hell Is Us? What if they had a script as strong as Clair Obscur? What if it had adopted the decision-making and consequence of Come Deliverance II? What if they'd made time a precious resource like the altars? What if it had been co-op like modern Far Cry games? What if it had offered a really interesting and compelling loot game like the Ghost of Tsushima Legends mode did? I'm not saying that Yotei should have had all of these things or even any of these specific things, but just something, right? Like something to hang its hat on other than being an absurdly good looking game that still has best in class combat for this type of game. Simon Cardy of IGN penned an op-ed recently that was titled, "I'm bored of every PlayStation game telling the same story." And I don't agree with that headline because I think it's pretty easily disproven, but I do agree with the vibe that I'm guessing possessed him when he sat down to write that. Ghost of Yotei is defined by the familiar feeling it evokes. The one where even though you're experiencing something new, your brain is telling you that you have seen this before. Its generic revenge story, its lifeless characters, its unchanged open world structure, and its familiar combat. Ghost of Yotei cements Ghost of Tsushima as the zenith of this genre. And unless studios are willing to remix things a hell of a lot more than this, then it's going to be all downhill from here.
My name is Atsu.
Ghost of Yotei is the story of Atsu, a girl whose parents are brutally murdered before her eyes by a group of people who seem to enjoy making children suffer for some reason. It's one of the things that never sat right with me about Yotei's storytelling. Its paper-thin narrative regularly reverting to cruelty towards children as a means of upping the dramatic stakes. I'm aware that violence and cruelty toward children exist in real life, but if you're going to invoke them as a narrative tool in your lighthearted MA15+ rated AAA open world action adventure game, you need to be pretty careful and clever with how you wield it. Suckerpunch wield that tool as a clumsy cudgel, smashing us over the head repeatedly as they drip-feed reveals of Atsu's family's final moments, painting vivid pictures of monstrous cruelty, only to then spend the remainder of the game's runtime trying to humanize these villains, handing them convenient excuses for their actions so that we're supposed to feel conflicted or something. This is where Tarantino got it right when he penned his opus and one of my top 3 favorite films of all time, Kill Bill. That was the story of a woman murdered by a gang of killers, her family ripped from her in an act of such irredeemable evil that there was no way that any of those people could come back from that. And Tarantino knew that, so he didn't try. When Beatrix came face to face with O-Ren Ishii, O-Ren didn't offer up some sub-story about how her dad didn't love her or how she was just following orders or some shit. She knew what was about to happen and they just got on with it. Bud even says, that woman deserves her revenge and we deserve to die. And yeah, when you murder a pregnant woman during her wedding rehearsal, then that tale of bloody revenge is going to have only one happy ending. But rather than embrace the cathartic revenge fantasy that might have worked when your inciting event is based on such malevolent cruelty, Suckerpunch want to turn it into an instructive fable about revenge being bad. And yeah, we know it is. So if you're going to tell us again, then you got to set it up right. When The Last of Us Part 2 dwelt on revenge being bad, it at least had a really compelling starting point. Joel did what he did not out of mindless cruelty or out of revenge, but out of a deep instinctual urge to protect his adopted child. You can understand why a man might do that, and so exploring the ripple effects of that act and the decision to choose to stay locked in a cycle of vengeance when that's the starting point, that's inherently very interesting, even if you don't agree with all the ways that Part 2 did that exploration. But if Last of Us Part 1 ended with Joel gleefully murdering 2 parents in front of their screaming children, and then murdering both of those children, one by pinning them to a burning tree with a katana through the shoulder, I'm gonna think to myself, Ellie, Joel got what he deserved, and you should go home. If it sounds like I'm dwelling too much on this, it's because Yotei has nothing else other than this one-dimensional, poorly constructed revenge story. The historical backdrop of the Mongol invasion is obviously gone, but there's no other broader historical event to take its place. Similarly, there's no exploration of the samurai code and what it means to abandon one's honor, because Atsu isn't a samurai. But there's nothing to replace that either. Atsu is a faceless mercenary who wanders the land as an almost ephemeral presence. She doesn't represent a place since she was displaced from her home at an early age. She doesn't represent a moment in time because she's untethered from societal structures or class roles. She doesn't represent a specific military or martial art tradition since she adopts whatever tools are at hand. Her only quest is against the Yotei 6 and her only arc is a moral one. Is revenge worth it if it means throwing everything else away? The answer will shock you. Shorn of the historical, cultural, and thematic adornments which often define these samurai epics, Ghost of Yotei feels hollow and fungible. Like you could set the same story in the medieval English countryside and you wouldn't need to change a whole lot. You wouldn't need to sub in a Viking invasion or an English king and his court or a meddlesome clergy or a burgeoning foreign commercial interest or anything. You wouldn't need to do any of that Control-C, Control-V because there's nothing to Control-C. That isn't to say that every feudal Japan era epic needs to tick all of these boxes, but it is notable that Yotei ticks like none of them, and the flimsy revenge tale isn't strong enough to carry Yotei over the line on its own. Ghost of Tsushima's biggest weakness was its storytelling. It wasn't bad, but it wasn't doing too much either. Still, between the Mongol invasion and Jin's revenge story and his personal struggle with his code and his honor, and with a smattering of worthwhile side stories here and there, it ultimately came together well enough, but it was still easily the weakest part of that experience. Earlier I said that Suckerpunch had essentially perfected this style of open world game and that there was nowhere else for it to go, but I never said anything about the story. That was far from perfect in Ghost of Tsushima, and there were many places that it could have gone here in Yotei. If Suckerpunch had no plans to meaningfully expand the gameplay side of this experience, then priority number 1, 2, and 3 should have been story. Instead, here what we get is a massive downgrade, and had this been stronger, it might have helped you forget that you've already seen and experienced almost all of what Ghost of Yotei has to offer. This is typically the point in the review where I belt out 1,000 words on Yotei's open world design, but the truth is, I really don't have anything new to say about it that I haven't already said of the first game. There are some aesthetic differences, though that's not quite the right word. It's more accurate to say that the veneer of certain activities has been altered or replaced, the substance remains the same. Chasing foxes is a good example. You can still do that here, but now you can also chase wolves who lead you to places where other wolves have been captured, deepening your connection to the wolf that watches over you during your journey.
We're getting this one out of here.
Instead of composing haiku, Atsu now paints using the DualSense's touchpad as a canvas. So you get what I'm saying, right? These things are both technically new, but they don't feel new. They fit within the existing open world design framework without really expanding or improving it. Outside of that, it's all the same stuff. Climbing cliff sides to unlock shrines, bamboo strikes, clearing out enemy camps, and getting your kid off to take a bath and do some deep thinking.
Mount Yotei, the she-mountain. I used to greet her every morning.
Now to be clear, Yotei does what Yubi don't, which is meter out all this stuff in perfect measure and serve it up to you so organically that it never feels like busy work, more like pleasant detours. You'll chart a course toward a main objective when suddenly a little birdie appears beckoning you to follow, or you'll spot a traveler being shaken down, or you'll collide with an occupied village. Yotei's world design is essentially a number of valleys or fields or basins, and that means you can strike out in any direction at any time, and when you do that, you're sure to quickly, very quickly, find something to do. The shortness of these activities and how easy it is to stumble upon them, it all makes them feel quite snackable. It's like Sushi Train, where the little plates of food come to you and you can be like, yeah, I'll have some of that, or nah, I'm good, and because it's so effortless, so well portioned, and so tasty, it's a great way to eat. Moderation and convenience are the secret sources of Suckerpunch's open world design. All of this remains as good here in Yotei as it did in Tsushima, but it's no better, and I've already experienced most of this before, and I didn't really enjoy experiencing it again, or at least I enjoyed it way less. One thing I did enjoy more were the weapon training side quests. These are each tied to a region, and you go and find some weapons master who's living in hiding. They'll be reluctant to train you at first, but eventually you'll get them on side. Learning the dual katana was perhaps the best one because Suckerpunch had managed to gamify the 1980s training montage in a way that no other video game had been able to do. The way the difficulty of the task was calibrated to denote the strength of my left arm, and how I could see and feel myself getting steadily better as the sensei trained me was a really great moment. Later quests would involve me solving problems throughout the region, with those quests giving me access to new techniques and weapon upgrades. It felt very fitting for a journey of this type. Less impressive were Suckerpunch's attempts at puzzles. One of the regions sees you chasing a member of the Yotei 6 known as the Kitsune, and they're meant to be a tricksy fox reliant on subterfuge and misdirection. The way that Suckerpunch tries to sell you on this is that the Kitsune has left puzzles all throughout the region, but they're so mind-numbingly basic that I found myself infuriated by them. We're talking Cocomelon level brain teasers here. We're putting any and all thought into them is to give them far too much credit. I bristle at these sorts of puzzles because it's like, is this a game for children or adults? Like, you have to pick one. If I'm watching scenes of children being gruesomely murdered, then I guess you want me to take this thing seriously. But if you're asking me to solve puzzles that your average preschooler would breeze through, then what are we doing here? I know it sounds like a small gripe blown out of proportion, but Yotei and Ghost of Tsushima as well are experiences that are designed in such a way that you never really have to think. It's that Sushi Train design of the open world coming to you rather than you going to it. So it's notable that the one time Ghost of Yotei does ask you to think, it basically assumes that you can't. In closing out this block on world design, I want to be really clear about why I sound so down on it. It's not that it's bad, it's great in fact, and had I been experiencing all of this for the first time, I'm sure I would have loved this because I loved it in Tsushima, but it's the same, and I actually would have been okay with that had the story delivered. You probably know this about me already if you've watched enough of my reviews, but I don't view games as a sum of their pros and cons. If a game can get something really, really right, then I'm on board and I focus on that thing, and my brain kind of forgives or ignores a lot of what sits around that thing. Silent Hill F is again the perfect example, but if there's nothing like that, nothing that really hooks me and that can soak up my attention, then my complaints become much more generalized because I have more time to think about all the reasons I'm not enjoying something. Yotei's world design is no better or worse than Tsushima's, but without having a satisfying, rewarding plot to pull me through that world, I looked around and thought to myself, I've done all this before, and I'm not really in the mood to do it again. The foundations of combat in Ghost of Yotei are just as strong as they were in Ghost of Tsushima, and I'd argue that they're even stronger here. Biggest difference is that Atsu is now able to wield up to 5 weapons, seamlessly switching between them to counter enemy weaknesses. The term rock, paper, scissors gets thrown around a lot. I think you'll struggle to find a review of Yotei that doesn't use that term, but that's because it's 100% accurate. Dual katanas beat polearms beat kusurigama beats shields, Odachi beats brutes, and katanas beat, well, katanas. These new weapons do open up space for unique combos and maneuvers that make the already strong combat framework better. You can drive a polearm into an opponent's chest to skewer them before seamlessly switching to a katana for a charged, unsheathing attack. There's also quickfire weapons like kunai and smoke bombs and a pistol, so you can weave those into your flow such that you're attacking both near and far, clashing steel before suddenly vanishing into a cloud of smoke. It is cool as hell, both in terms of how it looks and how it feels. We talk a lot about the Sony movie game and we think that's all about cutscenes. There's another dimension to that that's often overlooked: cinematic action. The way that combat is framed in games like Horizon and God of War and Yotei looks incredible, but there's no sacrificing playability to achieve those results. This is not style over substance, it's style and substance. It isn't as deep or demanding as more niche offerings, but it's just the right mix of accessibility versus complexity. And while I wasn't invested in Yotei's story and its open world wasn't doing anything I hadn't experienced before, combat encounters were always something I looked forward to, and even now I'd happily boot up Yotei again just to feel the weight of the blade in Atsu's hand. While the fundamentals of combat are strong as hell, the itemization and progression are real missed opportunities, I think. Take upgrading your weapon, for example. Mostly it's just collecting some resources laying around each region and then damage goes up. Your weapon doesn't get any new capabilities or status effects or whatever when this happens. It's literally just number go up. Where the game does try to offer more variation is with armor, but it doesn't really land either. I played this game for 40 hours and I never really found a single armor set that I was truly happy with, except for the samurai looking one. But I don't want my Atsu to look like a samurai because she looks cool as hell in the Ronin kit. But there was no way to change the look of my gear separate from its bonuses, so I was stuck wearing an armor set that I didn't really like. Other armor sets I'd unlock all had big annoying trade-offs or pointless bonuses that made them unappealing. I suppose the intention was that you'd put up with that stuff and compensate for it with charms that give you additional bonuses. But again, a lot of them were just kind of pointless filler, stuff that gave me bonuses in very, very specific circumstances rather than more broad-based utility. With 5 distinct weapon types, I would have loved an itemization system that let me really specialize with 1 or 2 weapons, but there just aren't enough options across the itemization pool to allow for that. I suppose that's by design though, since the rock, paper, scissors combat design wants you to switch between weapons instead of just riding a favorite, but even then, some more agency in buildcraft would have been nice. It's funny because the itemization is a massive step back versus what was offered in the Ghost of Tsushima Legends mode, which came out after the initial release of Tsushima all those years ago. That was a PvE co-op add-on that allowed you to specialize into specific combat roles, and the itemization underpinning that experience was surprisingly deep. Now, it's a totally different framework there, so you couldn't lift and drop it here in Yotei, but the depth and the complexity and the agency would have been nice if Yotei had its own version of that, and it doesn't. Something similar can be said of character progression, where the various skill trees aren't really about picking specific perks to create a build, they're more just about picking all of the perks so that you can steadily unlock everything over time. Again, a narrower but deeper set of options that demanded some decision making and trade-offs would have made for a more engaging and personalized combat experience, allowing you to craft an Atsu that was uniquely yours, while also encouraging additional playthroughs if you're into that sort of thing. But look, consistent with what I said earlier, Suckerpunch really nailed the combat in Tsushima and they've nailed it again here in Yotei. So I'm not too bothered by these progression and itemization issues. The new weapons, the expanded roster of enemies, the quickfire weapons, and the side quests associated with unlocking new techniques all make for a more robust experience, true improvements on a combat model that already felt like it couldn't get much better.
Please don't get involved!
We'll find every last member of the Yotei Six.
Okay, so let's wrap up this review. Firstly, it would be very unfair of me not to mention how breathtakingly beautiful Ghost of Yotei is. Like, it's just staggeringly stunning, and no YouTube video can do it justice. Seeing this on your own hardware, big screen TV, HDR, mate, it is just unbelievable. As a PC main, it's the kind of game that makes me go, you know what, console fans? I get it. When you can enjoy something that looks this good and runs this well on a device that costs, $750 tops, and you don't need to worry about any of the hassle that comes with PC gaming, I get it. It wouldn't make me a console main, but I get it. And it's almost humbling to see what Suckerpunch have delivered here when so many other games look worse and run worse on hardware that is far, far more expensive. The soundtrack, man. Atsu carries a shamisen with her, and in addition to playing songs throughout the game, the soundtrack is heavily leveraged into this instrument, and frankly, it's incredible. It's not background listening like so many other soundtracks are. The percussive nature of the shamisen brings it to the forefront during chase sequences and combat duels, and it's just a brilliant stylistic choice that gives Yotei its own identity and its own fingerprint. In the future, when I think back to what it was like to play through Yotei, I think the first thing I'm going to recall is the strum of the shamisen as I crossed swords or followed a wolf or just sat quietly on a cliffside. The shamisen stands out as a defining part of Yotei not only because of its inherent identity, but also because there are very few other aspects of Yotei that manage to leave any mark at all. Atsu's tale of revenge begins suddenly, and the brutality of its inciting incident is at odds with the rest of the game's tone or the message it tries to impart with its awkward storytelling. There's no broader historical drama to serve as backdrop, no societal or cultural reflections. Cast of characters you meet are mainly vendors, but for a very small handful of characters who play a central role in your story, and while these characters can have their moments, they aren't strong enough to make up for Yotei's wafer-thin plot. From a gameplay perspective, Ghosts of Yotei's combat improvements are notable, but it's the underlying brilliance of the combat model that stands out most. It survives a second outing where the world design does not. Yotei may be set in a different location, but it feels the same as the previous game, and the cosmetic additions or changes can't offset that niggling, ever-present feeling that you've seen and done all of this before. When Ghost of Tsushima burst onto the scene, it was held up as the anti-Ubisoft game. It seemed like it was a response to all of the frustrations we had with Ubisoft's open world design model, as its pacing, moderation, and convenience all felt like a breath of fresh air. In contrast, Ghost of Yotei feels like the quintessential Ubisoft game, not in its design philosophy, but in the sense that a studio found a really good formula, and so they just pushed out another one without any real change or innovation. For that reason, my recommendation for Yotei is similar to my recommendation for Assassin's Creed Shadow. This is a good game, but you know what it is, and you've played it before, and if you're excited by the prospect of playing it again, you are going to enjoy yourself. But if you're looking for something new, you won't find it here. And I'll say again what I said back in 2020. Ghost of Tsushima perfected this formula. There is nowhere else to take it. Yotei proves that. So I hope the developers can barrel towards new frontiers, because we don't need more of these games. We have enough of them already, and I hope that the talent and resources that these studios possess can be put towards creating new things that we've never experienced before, rather than slightly remixing games we've already played. Ghost of Yotei has some truly incredible sound design and an iconic OST, so if you want to hear every clash of steel and every strum of the shamisen, then you're probably going to want to check out SteelSeries' award-winning lineup of audio products. That lineup just got bigger recently because SteelSeries just released, for the first time ever, a set of earbuds that are meant to bridge the gap between gaming and everyday use, offering you the best of both worlds without any compromise. The Arctis Game Buds are a genuine revolution in the world of gaming and lifestyle audio, because this is one product that can do it all. I mean, at a basic level, you get the excellent award-winning sound quality you've come to expect from SteelSeries. So whether you're listening to Gunfire and Call of Duty or your favorite tracks on Spotify, you're going to be getting clean, crisp highs and weighty, bassy lows. Then there's the tech that powers all of this. It supports Bluetooth, which is what you'd expect, but it also has a USB dongle that enables 2.4 GHz wireless. This is the industry standard for high-speed audio connections, way speedier and more reliable than Bluetooth, and it means the Arctis Game Buds can work with a PS5 since PS5s don't have native Bluetooth support. Since it supports both connection formats, you can actually have it connected to both 2.4 and Bluetooth at the same time, switching seamlessly between the two of them if you get a phone call, for example. And because it has that dongle, you can plug it into almost any device that has a USB-C port, including a PC, a Switch, a Steam Deck, and even a VR headset. The Arctis Game Buds also support 360-degree spatial audio, meaning they're compatible with games utilizing things like Tempest 3D Audio, Microsoft Spatial, and Sonar Surround. Plus, there's a dedicated app that lets you select from over 100 custom gaming profiles, so you can be sure you're getting the best audio experience for the most popular games. It supports active noise cancelling, so you're only hearing the sounds you want to hear, and that battery life is crazy. 10 hours without having to dock them in the charger, and the charger will charge them 3 times for a total of 40 hours without having to plug them in. Best of all, for me at least, they stay in my ear. SteelSeries scanned over 62,000 ears to find a design that had the best chance of providing both fit and comfort, and and they totally nailed it. SteelSeries sent me these early and I've been using them for months now. For real, I could not be more satisfied with them. I use them both at home and out and about. I use the 2.4 and the Bluetooth. I use them with and without custom sound profiles. No matter what I'm doing or how I choose to do it, they always impress me, and they've instantly become a staple in the way I play games and consume audio content. If you would like to grab a pair, then visit steelseries.com and don't forget to use offer code SKILLUP at checkout, because that'll get you a 12% discount, no strings attached. That's steelseries.com, offer code SKILLUP at checkout for 12% off. Thanks SteelSeries for sponsoring the video, and thank you for watching it.